Hello, thank you for stopping by. My name is Becky and this is BecxReadz, and today I have a recommendation collab for you. The lovely Hannah at Hannah Blackwell asked me to participate in this collaboration with a few other booktubers to recommend to you guys some hate to love / rivals to lovers romances. So today's collaboration includes myself, April, Ava, B, Daphne, Hannah, Jess, and Tiff. I will have all of their channels linked down below, so be sure to go follow them and see what hate to love, rivals to love recommendations they have for you today. I'm going to start with an upper YA series that has a little bit of hate to love in it, and it is one of my favorite YA series of all time, and that is the Descendants of Isis series by Kelsey Ketch. The first book is Daughter of Isis. This is an Egyptian-based YA series, and we follow Natera, who has just moved to this new high school in this very kitschy, like Egyptian-themed California town. And when she gets there, she catches the eye of Seth. And Seth is part of this very dark religious cult that worships Set, who is the Egyptian god of chaos. And he has this power to like influence people and draw them to him. However, he can't really draw Natty to him. She wants nothing to do with him, and that just makes him even more intrigued. But she has some animosity towards him because he is such a playboy, and he's known around town to be the bad boy that she should steer clear of. And anytime she's around him, she just gets really bad feeling. But something happens, and Natty ends up in danger, and it ends up being Seth who saves her. And this kicks off his rebellion from this really dangerous cult and him willing to do whatever it takes to protect her. And so they really start out as rivals, but they slowly become a little bit more. There's not really any lovers in this per se because it is a YA, so you're not going to get a lot of smut in this. However, that being said, there is innuendos of a lot of sexual assault in this book because they are part of a cult. And they do brainwash their members and they take advantage of them, most of them being young women. So keep that in mind if that sounds interesting, that this book does, it has some darker undertones and it's got a lot of triggers in it. So check that out if you're interested at all. But it is one of my favorites simply because I do love Egyptian mythology. And this was probably the first YA series I ever read that wasn't Greek inspired. It was Egyptian inspired. So that is why I love it so much. Next up, we have one that has become pretty popular as of late, and that is A Ship of Bones and Teeth by Karina Halley. So this is a dark Little Mermaid retelling. It is about Marin, who made a deal with the Sea Witch in exchange to become human and have Prince Eric fall in love with her. After 10 years of marriage and abuse, she is ready to go back to the sea. She wants to get her fins back and get away from Eric's abuse. So they are on a ship together, and it gets commandeered by Captain Ramsey, who is this sexy, dark pirate ship captain. And he imprisons her with all the other crew, but in doing so, he unleashes Marin's monstrous side, and he takes the brunt of her monstrous tendencies, and it is extremely hot, very smutty. I will say though, it took a while to get to the actual romantic and smutty elements of this book. I was expecting it to kick off right from page 1, but it actually took over 150 pages into this. I mean, it's a 450-page book practically, but I was surprised at just how slow the buildup was. But once it gets there, baby, it gets there and it takes off, and I thoroughly enjoyed myself with it. Next, I have a fantasy romance for you, and that is Ledge by Stacey McEwen. So in this, we are following Dawson, who has lived her entire life on this icy prison ledge, and her only goal pretty much is survival. She's trying to remain out of the clutches of these winged people called the Glacians, who will pluck people off of this icy ledge to use as human sacrifices. But her luck runs out, as it does with all the people on the ledge, and she gets chosen. But instead of just giving in and submitting to being their sacrifice, she takes the option of being their plaything pretty much, and used as a pawn in their sick game, where they will set her free to try and make it down to the human lands, but she has to traverse this very dangerous mountain. What she doesn't expect, however, is for one of these half Galatians to actually end up helping her, because he has some secrets of his own and he is looking for freedom as much as she is. And together they start out as rivals. They really don't want anything to do with each other, but throughout the story you see them coming closer together and realizing that they have more in common than they thought. The next recommendation I have for you is The Will in the Wilds by Charlie N. Holmberg. In this, we follow Enna, who possesses this magical stone that controls the will of these dangerous creatures in the woods called mistings. And when these mistings band together to attack her, she realizes the only way that she can stay safe is to get the protection of an even more dangerous misting. So she sets out and she seeks the help and protection of McCallus. But his protection isn't free. He wants a price, and that price is her soul. So she ends up agreeing to this, and she slowly starts giving him pieces of her soul bit by bit by bit until it becomes to a dangerous level where they are pretty much dependent on each other to stay alive. So they start out in this tenuous relationship of not trusting each other and not really liking the situation they're in, but through the story you see them get closer, and then something will happen and it'll pull them apart, and then they have to work through their issues once again. It is a very low steam fantasy romance, so don't expect much smut in this, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. I liked the audiobook and I thought it was a really unique story. My next recommendation is the only one that I don't own physically, and that is Dance of a Burning Sea by E.J. Mello. This is another fantasy romance. This is about Naya, who is one of 3 deadly sorceresses known as the Musai. They are bound by oath and blood to be used by the king to protect their kingdom from outsiders. And when the pirate lord Alos returns to Naya's life, she only intends to use him for her own advantages. But something goes wrong, and she ends up in a contract with him where she has to spend a year on his pirate ship to repay the debts that she owes. This is a very slow burn romance. For most of the time I was reading this book, I wasn't even sure these two liked each other. They are a very toxic couple. He whips her. He chains her up. It's a very toxic relationship, but through this, they somehow manage to fall in love with each other. It is a bit of a second chance as well, because these two did have an encounter when they were both younger and something pulled them apart. So they sort of have this animosity with one another because of their past. But I really enjoyed this story. I liked the seafaring adventures and the life on the pirate ship, and I loved the magic involved. So I highly recommend you check this out. The next hate to love romance I have to recommend to you is Phoenix Unbound by Grace Draven. So in this, we are following Ghislaine, who has the ability to shift her appearance and to withstand flame. So she lives in this very evil and corrupt empire where every year they collect young women to be sacrifices and burnt at the stake for this empire. Nobody knows that she has this ability, so she's able to just do it over and over again, and that saves more of the women in her village. However, one person does take note of her ability, and that is the enslaved gladiator Azarion. He ends up kidnapping her and using her to escape the capital, and forces her to accompany him back to his kingdom where he wants to reclaim his title. On this journey to get to his kingdom, they're learning about each other's abilities and the magic that is involved in this kingdom and how corrupt it is, and how they can work together to take down the Queen Empress of this kingdom. This was my favorite book in this series as well, and while it did take me a while to get into it, once they start out on their journey, I was highly invested in their relationship. The next recommendation is another fantasy romance, and that is Glint by Raven Kennedy. So this is the second book in the Plated Prisoner series. The hate to love relationship really kicks in this second book. In this, we follow Auron, who is gold touched. She has been kept as a pet by Midas, and she's pretty much lived in a cage her entire life. But when something happens, she finds herself in enemy territory. She's a prisoner of Commander Rip and his army, and she slowly starts to realize that maybe the enemy isn't who she thought it was all along, and maybe the true prison was the gilded one that she has lived her life in for so many years. I absolutely loved this series. I binge read all 4 books in like a matter of a couple days. I was so obsessed with this series. I know a lot of people said the first book was really slow and it really didn't pick up, but I was caught up with it from the get-go. So I highly recommend this one if you're looking for some hate to love vibe. Next is one of my best books of the year so far. It was my first 6-star read of this year, and that is Master of Storms by Beck McMaster. So this is the 5th book in her Legends of the Storm series. I'm always recommending it. I'm always talking about it. I'm not gonna stop. This entire series revolves around a group of dragon shifter siblings who are trying to overthrow their very evil and corrupt mother from the throne. And in this one, we are following Mardok and Solveig. Mardok was supposed to go to this neighboring kingdom and pick one of the sisters to be his mate and form an alliance with them. So he ends up picking Solveig and they form a bond, and then he takes off. He leaves her. And she is pissed. She is a very kick-ass woman. She has plans to become the next queen of her country. So how dare this man up and leave her? So she sets out for revenge to hunt his ass down and actually kill him. That's her plan. But when she ends up finding him, she's put in this position where they have to pretend like they have this unbreakable union because her territory needs to form an alliance with a different territory. And in pretending to be in a stronger relationship than they actually have, these two end up actually kindling a much stronger relationship than they originally had. This book made me cry, it made me swoon. I loved the relationship in here, and I just love this entire series overall. I think it is such a well done fantasy romance with dragon shifters. It's just so well constructed, it's so vast, and I thoroughly enjoy it, and I think more people need to read it. So if you haven't read the Legends of the Storm series, I don't recommend starting with this. But this was the one that had the hate to love relationship in it, and it was my favorite of the year, so I couldn't help but squeeze it in here. And this last recommendation I'm just throwing in here because it fits the hate to love, rivals to lovers theme. I don't really think I need to tell you what it's about, and that is A Court of Mist and Fury. A Court of Mist and Fury. A Court of Mist and Fury. You don't need to know what this is. Fae romance. Everybody should know what this is by now. Even if you've never read these books, I'm sure you know what this is all about. I don't recommend starting with this one, but it is where the hate to love, rivals to lovers really kicks off and takes effect. So read it, it's great. So those are the books I have to recommend to you if you are looking for hate to love or rivals to love relationship dynamics within your stories. Let me know down below if you've read any of these, or let me know what your favorite hate to love, rivals to lover book is. Thank you, Hannah, for including me in this collab. And until my next video, thank you so much for watching, and go read a hate to love romance for me. Bye!